The 4 key topics that I speak on are motivation in the workplace, communication in the workplace, leadership in the workplace, and the best one of all, how to tell the total truth faster. Now, this is a tough program because what you're actually asking people to do is really share what's going on in the organisation and finding if your staff are actually willing to tell you the truth. 90% of organisations I work in probably don't know the real reason why their company isn't working effectively. So they bring in consultants that ask the same question that I ask the staff, which is, why aren't you working more effectively? So when staff and senior directors tell the total truth faster, organisations soar. I don't think I ever knew I had a talent to convey a message. I kept being asked what were some of the secrets, how I had run a very successful business. And I started my business when I was 20, bought my partner out when I was 26, made millions by the time I was 30, lost millions by the time I was 32. And I think when people started asking me, what were some of the lessons you've learned? And I just shared as a friend, people said, you should tell more people. And then I happened to meet somebody, one of these real sliding door moments, who said, look, a speaker's just pulled out. Would you be available for 45 minutes? And because I didn't know how important that meeting was, I was awesome. I think if I'd have known how important this meeting would have been, I'd have been nervous and over-prepared. And all I did was share from the heart 10 basic principles to success. And most of us know what success is whether you apply it. So I think for the last 18 years, I've been blessed by having audiences that want to learn, audiences that really want just one step up without just standing on chairs and doing a rah-rah session, because that doesn't last. So for years, people have used Myers-Briggs-Belbin to do personality profiling. And I have a real issue always with anybody that gets profiled because they come out as a lemon or a driver or a AFTMPCZ. And I always ask the audience, does anybody know what my style is? Bearing in mind I might have been talking for 15, 20 minutes, and nobody knows what my style is, but they're very clear to tell me what their style is. So I decided, how can I come up with a system that could not only help people communicate, but if they understood what being an effective zookeeper was, that if they could manage the animals in their camp, if they could manage the animals in their workplace, and they became a zookeeper, they would feed the animals the right food. If you talk to people in their language, the old Dr. Dolittle thing, you'd be amazed at the response. So I spent 5 years developing my program, It's a Zoo around here, to help people effectively communicate better, collaborate better, and have more fun in the workplace. About 10 years ago, I was asked to write a book called The Impact Code, which is really my life's work. So if you really want to succeed in business, you've got to create an impact. And it breaks down into 6 key categories. You've got to be in the room. You've got to model off the very best. You've got to be passionate. You've got to take action. You've got to communicate well. And you've got to trust the process. If you just imp without taking action, that's great. You've got presence. And if you take lots of action, but you don't have presence, that's like being an octopus on roller skates. You go a lot of places, but you don't get anywhere fast. So I spent my whole life having disasters and massive success, having run a massive successful finance company. I started with £12.80, had venture capital come into my business at 3 million, and then losing it all and becoming a minicab driver in my Bentley. And using those lessons, I now work in many companies, and I've worked with the likes of Sainsbury's, Beaverbrooks, BP, where we've had some real issues at a strategic level in turning them around in how to communicate effectively, but most importantly, engaging people. And if you engage in staff, then you get the real results. So one thing that I spend my life doing is getting a major organisation that thinks they've got all the answers, but doesn't really have all the answers, otherwise they wouldn't have brought me in. And nearly always I get told, it's our culture. Companies don't have a culture, people in organisations have a culture. So when you share that this organisation does not have a culture issue, but the people in it do, and you look at the senior team and recognise that most of them don't communicate, most of them don't tell the total truth, most of them don't understand this personal needs of their staff, and most importantly, they've probably never done one-to-ones with some of them. And when you teach the basic stuff and it's called Forward to Basics. You get the basic stuff right in how we started the business, then you can grow companies. But when you try and majorly magnify a whole business and make them fantastic overnight, it never works. So simple steps in going right back to basics. What I love doing, even though I enjoy doing a keynote presentation and doing my showcase speech, so I do a 45-minute show, it's great, but the problem is it's a bit like a Chinese meal. About 10 minutes later you want a bit more. What you really want is what I call an in-depth meal, where I get to play and interact with the audience by challenging them to question their already answers. So instead of questioning and answering their questions, I question their existing answers. So often I'll do a workshop based on my speech, anything between 45 minutes and 2.5 hours, and especially after lunch when nobody wants to do it, and play with them on the sense of what are the games we play at work, play games, and instead of worrying about how the game is played, is watch how they play the games. And when they get the evidence of how they play their game and they translate that into how they run their business, the evidence is such that people can identify why and how their businesses don't work or why they do work. I think I'm lucky that I love doing a keynote, but what I really love is when they invite me back to say, can you help us take this forward into the organisation and to the other ranks? Not necessarily higher or lower, but just across the board. Because if you have one motivated team and you've got 8 other teams that have got to interact with them and they're not, what happens is you've got disharmony. So I like working with clients I've already worked with, and this year, and this is going to sound like bragging, 76% of all of my clients have invited me back in-house. I think the reason most people book me is because of my energy on stage, the interaction on stage, but probably my no-nonsense approach. I honestly believe that today people want what we call entertainment. They want to be entertained, but they want some value, they want some take-home. They want to know they can implement it immediately. So everything that I share has a message, has let's find the right word, it has a meaning for them in the room, but it has a meaning when they leave the room, for them, their family and their business. So I'm really an inclusive speaker that's going to share a message that can be lifelong learnt. I think the best response I've ever had from a conference, and I've had 2. One is a guy who was in prison reading one of my books, The Impact Code, who said by listening to one and reading one line of my book, he realised he couldn't continue the same behaviour. And he's now out there being a speaker on his own. So that's kind of cool for me. But the best I've ever had is a young kid who was 17 who heard my message and decided at that moment in time he wanted to become an EasyJet pilot. 7 years later, you nearly know where I'm going with the story. I get a phone call, I've got my interview with EasyJet, can I come and meet you? I just want to know a couple of questions. And honest, the truth is, 4 years later, I'm on the plane when I hear the names, this is Captain Ollie. And I nearly died because I knew exactly who it was. So whilst I've had thousands of recommendations, thousands of testimonials, those 2 still tell me that even though it didn't make a difference in here on that day, lifetime is made a considerable difference. My biggest passion has always been the same thing, to inspire and empower people. And it sounds a bit crass and a bit woolly, but when I watch somebody leave a room thinking, I'm never going to do this again, or I'm now going to start doing this again, I've done my job. I'm responsible to the audience, not for the audience. And my job is to make sure I deliver something they can do, implement, change. And if really it affects the company as well, that's a bonus. But I love seeing people walk out with a smile. They go back to their wife and family or husband and family and say, you know what, from today I want to communicate better. Then I've done my job.